Have you ever been in a room full of people who had absolutely no idea who you really were, watching them tear you apart with their words, their laughter, their condescending glances, all while you held the power to change their entire lives with just a few sentences? Well, let me tell you something that happened to me that completely transformed the way I see people, success, and the masks we all wear in this corporate world we navigate every single day. This isn't just another story about revenge or getting even with people who wronged me. No, this is so much deeper than that. This is about human nature, about assumptions, about the dangerous game we play when we judge others based on appearances. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at workplace dynamics the same way again. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what I'm about to share with you. Because somewhere in this experience, you might see yourself, you might see your colleagues, you might see that moment when you realize that things aren't always what they seem. So buckle up, because this journey starts on a cold November evening at what was supposed to be a celebration, but turned into one of the most eye-opening nights of my entire life. The company annual party was scheduled for Friday, November 15th, at the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown, one of those places with crystal chandeliers hanging from impossibly high ceilings, marble floors so polished you could see your reflection, and waiters in crisp white jackets carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. I remember standing in my penthouse apartment that evening, looking at myself in the full-length mirror, adjusting the simple black suit I'd chosen specifically for this occasion. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth or authority, just a plain, forgettable outfit that would help me blend into the background. You see, I had made a decision 3 months prior. A decision that my closest advisors thought was absolutely insane. A decision that my wife initially questioned but eventually supported, because she knew once I set my mind on something, there was no talking me out of it. I decided to go undercover in my own company, to see it from the ground level, to understand what my employees really thought, really felt, really experienced, without the filter of corporate hierarchy getting in the way. But let me back up a bit, because you need to understand how I got here. How a kid from a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than bird songs ended up signing Paychecks for over 300 employees. I didn't inherit this company. I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have connections or a fancy education from an Ivy League school. What I had was hunger. The kind of hunger that wakes you up at 4 in the morning with ideas bouncing around in your head so loudly you can't ignore them. The kind of hunger that makes you work 3 jobs while building your dream on borrowed time and borrowed money. The kind of hunger that doesn't understand the word impossible because giving up was never even an option in my vocabulary. I started this tech consulting firm 12 years ago in my studio apartment with a second-hand laptop, $500 in my bank account, and a vision that people called unrealistic, naive, too ambitious for someone like me. Whatever that meant. The first year was hell, absolute hell. I won't sugarcoat it. I survived on ramen noodles and black coffee. I slept maybe 4 hours a night if I was lucky. I faced rejection after rejection from potential clients who looked at me like I was wasting their time, and there were moments, dark moments at 3 in the morning, when I questioned everything, when I wondered if everyone else was right and I was just delusional. But something inside me, something stubborn and relentless, refused to let me quit. I landed my first major client through sheer persistence. I must have called them 17 times before they finally agreed to a meeting, and when I walked into that conference room, I knew I had one shot, one single opportunity to prove that I belonged there. I prepared for that presentation like my life depended on it, because honestly, it did. 3 hours of me pouring everything I had into showing them that I understood their problems better than they understood them themselves, that I had solutions they hadn't even considered, that betting on me was the smartest decision they could make. They signed, and that contract changed everything. Word spread. 1 client became 5. 5 became 20, 20 became 50, and suddenly I wasn't struggling to keep the lights on anymore. I was hiring employees, renting office space, building something real and tangible and successful. But here's what nobody tells you about success. The higher you climb, the more isolated you become. Suddenly, people weren't straight with me anymore. Every conversation became filtered through what they thought I wanted to hear. Genuine feedback disappeared behind polite smiles and strategic agreements. And I found myself in this bubble where I was making decisions that affected hundreds of lives but had no real idea what those lives actually looked like from the inside. That realization hit me hard one day during a quarterly review meeting when I noticed how every single person in that room agreed with everything I said, Even when I deliberately proposed something questionable just to test them, they all nodded along like bobbleheads, and I walked out of there feeling more alone than I did when I was eating ramen in my studio apartment. So I hatched this plan, this crazy, unconventional plan that would either give me the insights I desperately needed or blow up spectacularly in my face. I created a fake identity, fake credentials, fake work history, everything carefully constructed to present me as a mid-level hire, someone who had been with the company for about 8 months, someone unremarkable enough to fly under the radar but present enough to be invited to company functions. I worked with our IT department, well, actually just one guy I trusted completely, to create this alternate identity in our systems, and for the past 3 months, I'd been splitting my time between being the CEO in scheduled meetings and important functions, and being Marcus Williams, a systems analyst in the operations department, observing, listening, learning things that would have never reached my executive office in a million years. The things I discovered during those 3 months were both enlightening and heartbreaking. I learned that Sarah from accounting was struggling to pay for her daughter's medical treatments, but was too proud to ask for help. I learned that the innovation team had brilliant ideas they were too intimidated to share in official channels. I learned that middle management was creating bottlenecks and playing political games that were suffocating productivity. I learned that some of the people I trusted most were two-faced manipulators who said one thing to my face and completely different things behind closed doors. But I also learned about the incredible dedication of people who believed in our mission, who worked late not because they had to, but because they genuinely cared, who supported each other through personal crises in ways that no corporate policy could ever mandate. It was beautiful, and messy, and complicated and real in a way that boardroom presentations could never capture. And now, standing in front of that mirror, preparing to attend the annual party as Marcus Williams one final time, I felt this strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Tonight would be the night I revealed everything, but not at the beginning. No, I had something else in mind. I wanted to experience this party as Marcus to see how the company I built treated someone they perceived as ordinary, as expendable, as beneath them. My wife kissed me goodbye, told me to be careful, reminded me that people's reactions might hurt more than I anticipated, and she was right. She was so incredibly right. But I had to see this through. I had to know the truth, the unfiltered, uncomfortable truth about what I had created. The Grand Meridian was already buzzing when I arrived at 7:30, fashionably late enough to avoid the initial awkwardness, but early enough to observe the full spectrum of the evening's events. I walked through those massive oak doors into the ballroom and was immediately hit by the sensory overload of success, the tinkling of champagne glasses, the murmur of hundreds of conversations blending into a sophisticated hum, the scent of expensive perfume mixing with catered food that probably cost more per plate than Marcus Williams made in a day. I grabbed a beer from the bar, nothing fancy, just a regular domestic beer that matched my cover, and I positioned myself near one of the marble columns where I could observe without being too conspicuous. The first hour was relatively uneventful, people mingling, laughing, sharing stories about their year, and I actually enjoyed the anonymity of it all, just being another face in the crowd, nobody expecting anything from me. Nobody watching my every move for leadership cues or strategic implications. But then I noticed them. A group of 5 people from the marketing department clustered near the dessert table, and I recognized every single one of them because I had personally approved their hiring, their raises, their bonuses. There was Jennifer, the marketing director who I'd promoted just 6 months ago, giving her a 25% salary increase and expanded responsibilities because I believed in her potential. There was David, who I'd personally mentored through a difficult project, spending hours of my own time helping him develop skills that would advance his career. There was Rachel, Michael, and Tom, all people who had benefited directly from decisions I had made, policies I had implemented, opportunities I had created. And they were laughing, loud, obnoxious laughter that cut through the ambient noise. And as I moved slightly closer, pretending to examine the elaborate ice sculpture nearby, I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that they were laughing at someone, and that someone was standing right there with them trying to smile along, trying to be part of the joke, and that someone was Marcus Williams, or rather me. Actually, let me clarify. They weren't laughing at me directly at that moment, but they were talking about me, about Marcus, the systems analyst who apparently was the subject of much ridicule in their department. Jennifer was in the middle of an animated story, her hands gesturing wildly, her voice carrying across the space with that particular kind of confidence that comes from too much champagne and the certainty that you're surrounded by people who agree with you. And then Marcus, oh my God. Marcus actually suggested in the team meeting that we should consider customer feedback more seriously in our campaigns. Can you believe that? Like we haven't been doing marketing for years. Like we need some tech geek to tell us how to do our jobs. The group erupted in laughter, and I felt my jaw clench involuntarily, my fingers tightening around the beer bottle, because that suggestion, that supposedly ridiculous suggestion, was actually something I had carefully planted, something based on extensive data analysis showing that our marketing was increasingly disconnected from what customers actually wanted, something that could have saved us from the declining engagement rates I'd been seeing in the quarterly reports. David chimed in. Marcus is just trying too hard, you know, always volunteering for extra projects, always asking questions in meetings like he's trying to impress someone. It's honestly kind of pathetic when you think about it, like, dude, you're a systems analyst, you're not going to become CEO by brown-nosing. More laughter, and I noticed Rachel nodding enthusiastically, adding, someone needs to tell him that there's a ceiling for people like him, you know what I mean? Some people are meant to lead and some people are meant to follow. And Marcus is definitely a follower, probably always will be. The casual cruelty of it, the easy dismissal of someone's ambition and effort, the comfortable assumption that they could determine someone's worth and potential based on absolutely nothing substantial, it all hit me like a physical blow, and I had to remind myself to breathe, to stay calm, to remember why I was doing this. But it got worse, so much worse. Tom, who I barely knew beyond his personnel file, leaned in conspiratorially, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a whisper but was still easily audible. Between us, I heard Marcus is only here because of some diversity quota thing. You know how it is. Companies have to hire a certain number of, well, you know. He didn't finish the sentence, didn't have to. The implications hung in the air like toxic smoke, and the others didn't object, didn't call him out, didn't do anything except nod knowingly or look away uncomfortably, which in its own way was just as damning. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and consuming, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who had ever been reduced to a checkbox, every qualified individual who had their achievements attributed to something other than their own merit, every human being who had been othered and diminished by people who saw themselves as the default, the standard, the norm. I wanted to walk over there right then. I wanted to reveal everything, to watch their faces drain of color, to see the panic set in as they realized what they'd done, who they'd been talking about. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity about how deep this went. Maybe it was a masochistic need to fully understand the culture I had unknowingly allowed to flourish. Maybe it was the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my wife saying, if you're going to do this, do it right. Get the complete picture. So I stayed where I was. I took a long drink of my beer. I forced my face into a neutral expression, and I continued to observe, to listen, to absorb every painful detail of this revelation. The evening progressed, and I made my way through different clusters of employees, sometimes engaging in small talk as Marcus, sometimes just hovering on the periphery, invisible in the way that ordinary people often are at these kinds of events. And what I witnessed was a pattern, a disturbing pattern of behavior that I couldn't unsee once I started looking for it. The executives and senior managers had claimed the prime real estate in the ballroom, the tables closest to the stage, the areas with the best views, the spots where the waiters circulated most frequently with the premium appetizers. The mid-level employees filled in the middle sections, and the entry-level staff, the people who actually kept this company running day to day, they were pushed to the margins, literally and figuratively, standing in groups near the walls, drinking cheaper beverages, making do with whatever food made it to their side of the room. I joined a group of customer service representatives, young people in their 20s mostly, hardworking individuals who dealt with frustrated clients all day, who absorbed stress and anger so that the company's reputation remained intact, who were absolutely essential to our operation but were treated as completely replaceable. They welcomed me easily. Marcus Williams was one of them in their eyes, another cog in the machine, and their conversation was revealing in ways they probably didn't intend. They talked about feeling undervalued, about watching less competent people get promoted because they had the right connections, about suggestions that fell on deaf ears, about a sense that leadership didn't actually care about them as human beings, only as productivity metrics. One young woman named Katie, who couldn't have been more than 24, said something that absolutely gutted me. Sometimes I wonder if the CEO even knows we exist, like, does he ever think about the fact that real people are behind those employee numbers in his presentations? People with rent to pay and dreams to chase and lives that matter. The others murmured agreement, and I stood there, silent, knowing that I was the CEO she was talking about, that despite all my efforts, despite building this company from nothing, despite thinking I was creating something different, something better, I had failed to make these people feel seen, feel valued, feel like anything more than interchangeable parts. Have you ever had one of those moments where you see yourself clearly, truly clearly for the first time, and it's not the version you've been carrying around in your head? It's something different, something uncomfortable, something that demands change. Comment below if you've ever had an experience that completely shifted your perspective on something you thought you understood. But I wasn't done observing yet, not by a long shot. I excused myself from the customer service group and made my way toward the bar, where I ordered another beer and positioned myself where I could watch the senior leadership team, my executive team, the people I worked with most closely, the people who helped me make decisions that affected every single person in this room. They were holding court like royalty, laughing at jokes that probably weren't that funny, accepting the deference of lower-level employees who approached them with the careful choreography of subjects approaching a throne, basking in the attention and the power dynamics that I suddenly saw with horrifying clarity. My CFO, Richard, was particularly egregious, dismissing a junior accountant's attempt at conversation with barely concealed disdain, turning his back mid-sentence to talk to someone he deemed more important, more worthy of his time and attention. I watched Jennifer from marketing approach the executive circle, her demeanor completely transformed from the confident, cruel person I'd observed earlier. She was deferential, almost obsequious, laughing too hard at everything said, agreeing enthusiastically with every opinion expressed, performing deference in a way that was both calculated and desperate. And it struck me then, the full picture of what was happening here. These weren't inherently terrible people. Well, some of them might be, but most of them were products of a system, a hierarchy, a culture that rewarded certain behaviors and punished others, that taught people to punch down and bow up, that created these elaborate performances of power and submission that had nothing to do with actual competence or character or contribution. The DJ started playing music, something upbeat and modern, and people began dancing, loosening up as the alcohol flowed, and the formality of the early evening gave way to something more relaxed, more revealing. I stayed on the edges, watching, and I saw things that made my heart sink. I saw managers hitting on subordinates who clearly weren't interested but couldn't refuse without professional consequences. I saw cliques and exclusions and the kind of casual meanness that people engage in when they think nobody important is watching. I saw the company I had built, the dream I had poured everything into, reflected back at me in ways that were almost unrecognizable from what I had intended, what I had hoped for, what I had naively believed I was creating. Around 10 o'clock, something happened that would become the catalyst for everything that followed. I was standing near the back of the ballroom, partially hidden behind one of those decorative plants that expensive venues love, when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Two of my senior managers, people who reported directly to me, people I trusted with significant responsibilities and confidential information, were talking in voices slightly too loud from too much whiskey, and they clearly thought they were far enough from the crowd to speak freely. Mark from operations was complaining about a decision I had made the previous week regarding resource allocation, calling it short-sighted and stupid, questioning my competence, suggesting that I was out of touch with the realities of the business. And Lisa from HR, who I had promoted into her role specifically because I thought she shared my values about creating a positive workplace culture, was agreeing with him, adding her own criticisms, mocking my leadership style, imitating the way I speak in meetings with exaggerated gestures that were clearly meant to be insulting. But what really got me, what really crossed a line I didn't even know I had, was when Mark said, "Honestly, the only reason this company is successful is because of the team we've built despite him, not because of him. He got lucky early on, rode that wave, but now he's just an obstacle, a figurehead who thinks he's still relevant because he signs the checks." Lisa laughed, actually laughed, and responded, "Someone should tell him that signing checks doesn't make you a leader. It just makes you a bank account with an ego. We're the ones actually running this place, dealing with the real problems, making the real decisions. He just shows up for the glory moments and takes credit for work we did. I felt something break inside me in that moment. Not my spirit exactly, but maybe my patience, maybe my willingness to keep observing in silence, maybe my faith that this could somehow end anyway other than with a complete dismantling of the illusions everyone had built. These were people I had mentored, people whose careers I had actively developed, people I had trusted with the company I had built from nothing, and they were standing there, in a party paid for with profits generated by a business I created, drinking expensive whiskey purchased with company funds I provided, openly disrespecting me, openly questioning my relevance, openly taking credit for success that would not exist without the foundation I had laid, the risks I had taken, the vision I had, pursued when everyone else said it was impossible. I finished my beer, set the empty bottle on a nearby table with deliberate care, and made a decision. It was time, past time really, to end this experiment, to reveal the truth, to pull back the curtain, and let everyone see what had been hidden all along. But I wasn't going to make a scene, I wasn't going to yell or accuse or create drama. That wasn't my style, that wasn't how I operated. No, I was going to do this in a way that would make the point unmistakably clear while maintaining the dignity and composure that they clearly thought I lacked. I walked toward the stage, where the DJ was set up, and I caught his eye, gestured that I needed a moment with the microphone. He looked confused. Marcus Williams wasn't on the program. Marcus Williams had no reason to address the crowd, but something in my expression must have convinced him because he lowered the music and handed me the mic without argument. The room gradually quieted, people turning to see who was interrupting the party, curiosity and mild annoyance on many faces, and I stood there for a moment, just taking in the scene. All these people who worked for me, who I had hired or approved the hiring of, who benefited from the company I built, who had spent the evening revealing exactly what they thought of leadership, of hierarchy, of people they deemed beneath them or above them, none of them having any idea what was about to happen. I saw Jennifer and her marketing crew, still clustered together, looking at me with barely concealed disdain, probably wondering what the annoying systems analyst could possibly have to say that warranted stopping the music. I saw the executives, my executive team, looking uncomfortable because someone outside the approved speaker list was at the microphone, already moving to intervene, to restore order, to maintain the carefully controlled narrative of the evening. I cleared my throat, and when I spoke, my voice was calm, measured, carrying across the ballroom with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to yell to command attention. Good evening, everyone. I know this is unexpected. I'm not on the program. I'm just Marcus Williams, a systems analyst from operations, someone most of you probably haven't noticed or thought much about tonight. I paused, let that sink in, saw some confused looks, some nods of recognition from people who had interacted with Marcus over the past 3 months. I've been with this company for about 8 months now, and it's been an incredibly educational experience, eye-opening really, in ways I never anticipated when I accepted this position. Another pause. I was building to something, and some people were starting to sense it, starting to look uncertain, starting to realize that something was off about this whole situation. Tonight has been particularly educational, I continued, my voice still calm but with an edge now, a sharpness that cut through the comfortable buzz of alcohol and celebration. I've learned so much about what you all really think, what you really believe, how you really treat each other when you think nobody important is watching. I've heard conversations that were illuminating, comments that were revealing, judgments that were casually cruel, and assumptions that were deeply troubling. The room was completely silent now. People were looking at each other with growing concern. Executives were moving toward the stage, and I could see the exact moment when some people, the smarter ones, the more observant ones, started to suspect that something was very, very wrong with this picture. I want to thank some people specifically, I said, and my tone was almost pleasant, which somehow made it worse. Jennifer, thank you for explaining that my suggestions about customer feedback were naive, and that I should stay in my lane as just a tech geek who doesn't understand marketing. David, thank you for your insight that I'm pathetic for trying too hard and that I should accept my ceiling as a follower, not a leader. Rachel, Michael, Tom, thank you for your thoughts about diversity quotas and the casual racism that apparently flourishes in the marketing department. Mark and Lisa, thank you for clarifying that I'm just a lucky figurehead who's now an obstacle to the team you've built despite me, and that signing checks doesn't make someone a leader. You could hear a pin drop. The silence was that complete, that total. Jennifer's face had gone from confused to pale, the blood literally draining from her features as she started to understand. The executives had stopped their approach to the stage, frozen in their tracks, their expressions shifting from annoyance to dawning horror. Mark and Lisa were looking at each other with pure panic in their eyes, and I knew they were frantically trying to remember exactly what they had said, exactly who might have overheard, exactly how bad this was about to get for them. "Here's the thing," I said, and now I allowed some of the emotion I'd been holding back to color my voice. Not anger exactly, more like profound disappointment mixed with steely resolve. I agree with one thing that was said tonight. Signing checks doesn't automatically make someone a leader, but it does make me the CEO. I let that land, let those words explode in the silence like a bomb, and I watched the reactions ripple through the crowd like a wave, the gasps, the wide eyes, the hands flying to mouths, the frantic whispered conversations, the people pulling out their phones to search, to verify, to confirm what I had just claimed, because surely this couldn't be real. Surely Marcus Williams, the unremarkable systems analyst, couldn't possibly be the CEO, except that he was, I was, and now everyone knew it. My real name is Marcus, that part was true, but my last name isn't Williams, it's Harrison. Marcus Harrison, the person who founded this company 12 years ago in a studio apartment with $500 and a dream that people called unrealistic. I'm the person who signs your paychecks, approves your bonuses, makes the decisions that you've been criticizing all night. The person some of you have been mocking and dismissing and disrespecting without having any idea who you were actually talking about. I could see Jennifer literally swaying on her feet, could see David's career flashing before his eyes, could see the executive team trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. People rushing toward the stage, trying to apologize, trying to explain, trying to somehow undo what had been said and done. But I held up my hand, and something in my expression made them stop, made them wait, made them listen. "I'm not interested in apologies right now," I said, my voice cutting through the beginning attempts at damage control. "I'm not interested in excuses or explanations or promises that you didn't mean it. What I'm interested in is change, real change, fundamental change in how this company operates, how people treat each other, how we define success and value and contribution." I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could, wanting them to see that I was serious, that this wasn't just a dramatic moment that would blow over. This was a reckoning. Starting Monday, we're going to have some very serious conversations about culture, about respect, about the gap between what we say we value and how we actually behave. Some of you will still have jobs next week, some of you won't. And that decision will be based not on who apologizes most convincingly tonight, but on who demonstrates genuine understanding of what went wrong and genuine commitment to being part of the solution. I saw relief on some faces, terror on others, and a few people, a small but important few, nodding with what looked like approval, like maybe they had been waiting for someone to finally address the problems they'd been experiencing and observing. The party effectively ended after that. People left in small groups, some still in shock, some angry, some embarrassed. The festive atmosphere completely destroyed by the truth that had been revealed. The executives tried to approach me, but I told them we'd talk Monday, that tonight I needed space to process everything I'd witnessed, everything I'd learned. I walked out of the Grand Meridian into the cold November night, and I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier than I had in years. Lighter because I had finally addressed something that needed addressing. Heavier because I now fully understood the scope of what needed to change, how much work lay ahead, how many difficult decisions would need to be made. My wife was waiting up when I got home, and I told her everything, every detail, every conversation, every revelation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "You can't build something real on false foundations. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build it back better." She was right, and that's exactly what I did. The following weeks were intense. I had individual meetings with every employee. I implemented new policies around respect and accountability. I restructured management to remove the toxic elements. I promoted people who had been overlooked. I created channels for genuine feedback. I made it clear that the company I wanted to build was one where everyone felt valued regardless of their position, where ideas mattered more than hierarchy, where character counted more than charisma. Some people left, either because I asked them to or because they realized they didn't fit the new culture we were creating. Jennifer, David, Rachel, Michael, and Tom from marketing were all terminated, not as punishment exactly, but as a recognition that their values were fundamentally incompatible with where we needed to go. Mark and Lisa were given a choice: participate genuinely in the cultural transformation or leave with a severance package. They chose to leave, and honestly, it was better for everyone. But many people stayed, people who were energized by the changes, who felt like they could finally contribute fully, who appreciated working somewhere that valued substance over performance, merit over connections, humanity over corporate theater. The company didn't collapse. In fact, it grew stronger, more innovative, more resilient, because we were finally operating with authenticity, with people bringing their whole selves to work instead of performing elaborate roles in a hierarchy game. Productivity increased, employee satisfaction scores went up, turnover decreased, and we started attracting talent that wanted to work somewhere real, somewhere that practiced what it preached about respect and value and opportunity. Katie from customer service, the young woman who wondered if I knew employees existed as real people, she's now heading our customer experience division, bringing insights and empathy that have transformed how we interact with clients. Sarah from accounting, whose daughter's medical struggles I learned about during my time as Marcus, she's now benefiting from enhanced healthcare coverage and support programs that I made sure we implemented. Looking back now, 3 years after that night at the Grand Meridian, I can honestly say it was one of the most valuable experiences of my life, painful but necessary, destructive but ultimately constructive, because it forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about what I had built and what I needed to change. I learned that success without awareness is dangerous, that power without perspective is corrupting, that you can't lead effectively if you're isolated from the reality of people's experiences. I learned that assumptions are often wrong, that appearances are deceiving, that the person you dismiss might be the person who holds your future in their hands. I learned that building something meaningful requires constant vigilance, continuous evolution, and the courage to confront your own failures and blind spots. So here's what I want you to take away from this story, and really think about this, really let it sink in, and apply it to your own life. Every person you encounter has a story, has value, has potential that you might not see on the surface. And how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter reveals who you really are, more than how you treat people when you know they're watching. The way you talk about others, the assumptions you make, the judgments you pass, these things have consequences, sometimes immediate, sometimes delayed, but always real. And if you're in a position of power or influence, never assume you have the full picture. Never surround yourself only with people who agree with you. Never believe that your position protects you from needing to grow and change and evolve. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance or position, only to discover you were completely wrong? Have you ever been in a situation where you witnessed or experienced workplace toxicity that needed to be addressed? I want to hear your stories, your experiences, your perspectives, because these conversations matter. Because sharing our truths helps all of us navigate these complex human situations with more wisdom and empathy. Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Let's build a community where we can talk honestly about these dynamics, learn from each other's experiences, and support each other in creating better environments wherever we have influence. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about assumptions and respect and authentic leadership, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this content reach more people who might benefit from hearing it. Subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales for more stories like this. Real experiences, honest reflections, lessons learned through difficult situations that ultimately led to growth and positive change. These aren't fairy tales. They're truth tales, messy and complicated and real, the kind of stories that help us understand ourselves and each other better, and I'm committed to sharing them with you regularly. Click that notification bell so you never miss an upload, because I have so many more stories to share. Stories about second chances and hard lessons and unexpected revelations. Stories that will make you laugh and cry and think and question and hopefully, ultimately become better versions of yourselves. Thank you for being here, for listening to my truth, for for being part of this community where we strip away the pretense and get real about what it means to be human, to struggle, to succeed, to fail, and to keep growing through it all. Until next time, remember that kindness costs nothing, that respect is earned by giving it freely, and that the person you underestimate today might be the person who changes your tomorrow. Take care of yourselves, treat each other well, and I'll see you in the next one.